Good morning. I think all of the board members are in attendance now, so we can call to order. Welcome to the September 23rd Victim Compensation Board meeting. Council, will you please call the roll?
Member Becton.
Present.
Member Silva. Member Silva, it looks like you may be on mute.
Present.
Chair Rabel.
Present. Our first item is approval of the minutes for the July 15th, 2021 meeting. Is there any discussion, additions, or corrections to the minutes from board members?
No.
Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to approve item 1?
I'll move to approve.
And I'll second.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Okay, seeing none, council, will you please call the roll?
The motion before the board is approval of the July 15th, 2021 minutes. Member Becton.
Yes.
Member Silva.
Aye.
Chair Rabel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
The next item is public comment. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda. As any items discussed during public comment have not been agendized, the board is not permitted to take any action on these matters at this meeting. For those on the phone, if you previously indicated your desire to offer comments during this agenda item, we will be calling you by name or by phone number. For those participating via Zoom, please raise your hand if you wish to offer comment, and we will acknowledge you and let you know when it is your time to speak.
It appears we have no public comment today, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Greer.
I may have spoke too soon. I'm sorry. I see that Margaret Petros has just recently joined. Ms. Petros, do you wish to offer public comment? You're on mute. Thank you.
Good morning. No, I'm just here participating at this meeting, just listening to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petros. In that case, Ms. Greer, I think we can continue to item 3 on the agenda.
Perfect. Item 3 is the Executive Officer Statement, which will be presented by Executive Officer Linda Gledhill.
Good morning, board members. Thank you. I have a few updates for you, and then I will be walking through a short PowerPoint on some changes to the Federal Victim of Crime Act and how they will impact CalVCB. Earlier this week, I had the privilege of speaking at the virtual 2021 National Joint Training Conference for the Victims of Crime Act, VOCA Assistance and Compensation Administrators. This is an important annual conference sponsored by the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Victims of Crime and hosted by the National Association of VOCA Assistance Administrators. I participated in a panel discussion focused on how different states have approached changing eligibility requirements, such as allowing other documentation besides police reports to verify claims. There's a lot of interest in this nationally because the changes that I'm going to discuss later about VOCA allow this exception to cooperation. The new federal legislation is very similar to the statute CalVCB has had for several years now. We had a great session, and it reminds me of how important our work is here in California. The rest of the country looks to us to lead the way on compensation issues. Here in Sacramento, the state legislature wrapped up its business on September 10th. We were closely tracking several key issues, and you'll hear more about that in our legislative update. As I mentioned in July, on September the 3rd, the fathers and families of San Joaquin Trauma Recovery Center in Stockton closed its doors. As you recall, Fathers and Families was one of the 12 TRCs to win 2-year grant awards from CalVCB starting on July 1, but then announced it would have to shut down. Once the final invoices are reconciled with fathers and families, we'll know how much of their grant money did not get spent and could potentially be redistributed to other TRCs. And we'll come back to you at a future board meeting with that information. In the office, we had intended to return to the building to work 1 day a week starting in September, but we have put that on hold until we can fully implement the governor's order to test all unvaccinated employees weekly. Again, stay tuned for more information on that. Finally, as you'll remember, I promoted Natalie Mack to our Chief Deputy Executive Officer, which left a vacancy on our executive team. I'm happy to report we have hired Vincent Walker to fill Natalie's prior position as Deputy Executive Officer for the Victim Compensation Program. Vincent comes to us from the Employment Development Department, where he spent 16 years in various leadership roles. He provided oversight of various statewide programs and worked on claim management, quality assurance, policy and procedure development, and customer relations. He started here at Cal VCB in mid-August and has already jumped in and is hard at work on all of our program-related issues. Now I'm going to give you a short presentation on the Federal Victims of Crime Act, otherwise known as VOCA. We'll wait for just a moment for the PowerPoint to pop up. Okay, that is the last slide. So if we could go to the first slide. And the reason I really wanted to do a very short PowerPoint with all of you is that this is really significant. This is a change to the federal law that has been many, many years in the making. Is something that has significant impact for us and for other states. And I think it's important that the board is well aware of this issue. It was passed by signed into law by President Biden just after the July board meeting. All right, so we will move to slide number 2. There we go. So since its original passage by Congress in 1984, VOCA has provided funding for victim compensation programs and assistance programs across the country. As you may know, in California, Cal VCB handles all compensation, while Cal OES handles assistance grants. Cal VCB has traditionally been reimbursed by the federal government for 60% of its VOCA eligible claims. The way this worked is that Cal VCB pays claims according to state statutes and regulations, and then seeks reimbursement from the federal government through VOCA for VOCA eligible claims, which are most of the claims that Cal VCB receives. The calculation for each state's VOCA award is based on the state dollars paid out for the federal fiscal year 2 years prior. Once the award is received, we have 3 years to spend that money. For the last 3 federal fiscal years, Cal VCB was awarded between $15 million and $19 million for each year in VOCA reimbursements. On July 22nd, 2021, President Biden signed H.R. 1652, the VOCA Fix to Sustain the Crime Victims Fund Act of 2021, and the law went into effect immediately. And it made several important changes to VOCA. The most significant is that the reimbursement rate was increased from 60% to 75%. The bill also made language changes, as I mentioned before, that closely mirror what Cal VCB already has in statute. It allows exception to cooperation if the program determines that cooperation may be impacted due to the victim's age, physical condition, psychological state, cultural or linguistic barriers, or any other health or safety concerns that jeopardize the victim's well-being. The federal legislation, which was, as I mentioned, several years in the making, will help California and other states who have seen steady decreases in the VOCA funds. Based on our estimates, it appears that these changes will increase our federal reimbursement by 8 to 10 million in years going forward. This will require us to increase the federal grant allocation amount we are allowed in the state budget, and we have already submitted that request to the Department of Finance. As you know, Cal VCB currently receives a general fund backfill and anticipates that will need to continue in the future. This increase in federal money may mean that we will need fewer dollars from the general fund, but because of the cycle of the funding, it will take several years for us to understand the true impact on our budget. Now I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Executive Officer Gledhill. This is terrific news, both that the other states are continuing to see our work as a model for the rest of the country, and also great news about these changes to VOCA. That's outstanding, both on the eligibility requirements and on the increased compensation. And last but not least, welcome and congratulations to Mr. Walker. We're really happy to have you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Greer, I think we can move to item 4.
All right, item 4 is a legislative update, which will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer Andrew Lamar.
Thank you. Good morning. In your binder is a list of the bills that could impact CalBCB and where they stood at the end of the 2021 legislative session. The governor has until October 10th to sign or veto the bills that reached his desk. SB 299, which would compensate victims of police violence, was moved to the inactive file at the request of the author and became a 2-year bill. It is eligible to be acted upon again in 2022. I reported at the last meeting that language from AB 1007 had been included in a budget trailer bill, AB 137. That was signed by the governor in July, establishing the forced or involuntary sterilization compensation program. Victims will be able to apply to the program for a 2-year period beginning January 1st, 2022. And our implementation efforts are well underway. The budget bill funding the program provided $2 million to do outreach and administer it. In the final days of session, an additional $300,000 for outreach was added to another budget bill, SB 170, which passed and was sent to the governor. That bill directs CalBCB to use the money to contract with a Los Angeles-based community organization, the Alliances for a Better Community, for study and additional outreach to eligible claimants for the forced or involuntary sterilization compensation program. Once the governor signs the legislation, we'll work to incorporate this into our implementation efforts. SB 446, which would change the process for consideration of some erroneous conviction claims, was passed by the legislature and is now on the governor's desk. Since the last board meeting, both of this year's erroneous conviction claims bills have been signed by the governor. AB 1593 by Assemblymember Gonzalez contains a $5.7 million appropriation to pay 5 erroneous conviction claims approved by CalBCB, and those claimants have received their payments. SB 631 by Senator Portantino contains nearly $1.2 million to pay 1 additional claim. It was signed last week, and we're working with the Department of Finance and State Controller to process that payment. Those are the highlights. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Deputy Lamar. You've been very busy this session. I think the legislative interest in our work and the general public interest in our work speaks to its importance. Is there any question or comment or discussion from the board? Is there
any public comment on this item?
Okay, hearing none, I think we can move to item 5.
Okay, item 5 are the proposed 2022 board meeting dates, which will be presented by Executive Officer Linda Gledhill.
Good morning, board members again. It's hard to believe that we're talking about 2022, but this year has flown by. As you know, this year, 2021, was the first year that the board went to an every other month schedule. Staff has assessed that seems to be working well from our perspective, and we hope from yours as well. And so we would like to propose continuing the same schedule, the 3rd Thursday of every other month starting in January 2022. Those meeting dates are in your binder. Obviously, as things come up through the year, we can notice a change and they can be moved as long as we have enough notice for posted meetings, or we can have additional meetings if necessary for potentially 4,900 cases or other things that have a time deadline. But we wanted to get these dates in front of you now in case you had any questions or concerns. Otherwise, we will proceed.
Thank you, Executive Officer Gledhill. Is there any discussion or comment regarding the proposed board meeting schedule from board members? Do I have a motion to approve item 5?
I'll move to approve.
And a second? Great. So the motion is approval of the proposed 2022 board meeting calendar dates.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Council, will you please call the roll?
Member Becton,
Aye.
Member Silva,
Aye.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
motion passes.
Item 6 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of George Soliotis, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gutierrez. Also on the line, Caitlin Weisberg of McLean, Bernarski and Litt, and Mr. Soliotis, along with Mr. Barton Bowers from the Office of the Attorney General, are present and prepared to address the board.
Good morning, board members. On April 8th of 2015, Mr. Soliotis filed a Penal Code Section 4900 application as an erroneously convicted felon with the California Victim Compensation Board. That application is based on his 2000 convictions for arson and 3 murder charges with special circumstances, the crimes of which occurred in 1997. Extensive appellate and Cal VCB history is listed in the proposed decision, and I'm sure you've had an opportunity to review that. Also, I want to note that pursuant to Penal Code Section 1485.5, the factual findings by the court in the habeas proceedings are binding on the board. The proposed decision recommends compensation in the amount of $841,820, which represents $140 per day for the 6,013 days Mr. Soliotis was imprisoned. As the facilitator mentioned, Caitlin Weisberg is here as representative for Mr. Soliotis, who is also present, and Barton Bowers is here from the Attorney General's office.
Thank you, Counsel. We will hear first from Counsel for Mr. Soliotis.
Thank you. The proposed decision does an excellent job of summarizing the facts and circumstances of this case and Mr. Soliotis' innocence. And as I did in our written response, I want to thank Staff Attorney Michelle Phillips for her work on this matter and her thorough review of the record, and would like to urge the board to approve the claim and the proposed decision by Ms. Phillips. I also want to thank Attorney Barton Bowers, the Deputy and the Attorney General's office for their support of this claim. And beyond that, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about Mr. Soliotis in this case. Not very long, because as you know, much of the facts are covered in the proposed decision. Mr. Soliotis is truly a victim of circumstances beyond his control. In 1997, he was a local landlord in Modesto, California, and partially retired. On January 15th, a mother and her 2 children tragically died in a fire at one of his properties. They were his tenants. And although most residential fires are known to have accidental causes, if the causes are known at all, the fire investigators in this case immediately believed that the fire was arson based on what we now know as junk science. Because the fire investigators were misled into believing it was arson, possible accidental causes weren't properly investigated, and the actual cause of the fire is unknown and cannot be determined. But back in 1997, the fire investigators were certain it was arson, and they quickly found someone to blame, Mr. Soliotis. Of course, Mr. Soliotis has known from the beginning that he was innocent, but it took a long time to convince everyone else, And despite 16 years of wrongful incarceration and the years of litigation over his conviction in this claim, he has remained one of the most positive, gracious persons I've ever had the privilege of representing. Since his release from custody, George has spent time with his children and grandchildren, which is a blessing. And he's a ballroom dancer. I don't know if you saw that in the materials, but he continues to be a ballroom dancer, and he met his current partner through ballroom dancing. And also, since being released from custody, George's citizenship was finalized. So he's now a US citizen in addition to being a long-term resident member of our community. In other words, he has not let the wrongful conviction stop him from living his life to the fullest since his release. That having been said, the wrongful prosecution and incarceration cost him not only many years of his life, but also his entire life savings. George is truly deserving of this compensation, and the board can feel confident that it has taken an important step on behalf of the state of California to acknowledge and rectify the injustice that was done to Mr. Siliotis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Weisberg. Mr. Siliotis, would you like to address the board?
There are a lot of things I would like to say, but that will not help. I would like to say thank you for your decision and turn the page and live my life and try to fix my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siliotis. We will now hear from Mr. Barton Bowers of the Attorney General's office.
Yes. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Very good. Chair Ravel and members of the board, since first considering this matter, the Office of the Attorney General has changed position. The board has every reason to do the same. I strongly urge the board to grant the proposed decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. I want to thank all counsel for their efforts in this case, and counsel from VCB for the very thorough decision and write-up. It was very well done, and we could tell that a lot of work had gone into the careful consideration here. I'll start out by saying I support this claim, and I intend to vote to approve it. But I think there's some caution that's in order here in terms of potential precedent when an individual pleads to lesser charges after serving a portion of the original sentence, and those lesser charges are never overturned. But there are very unique facts here, and in particular, relying on the thoroughness of the decision and the support of the Attorney General's office here, I will vote to approve it. But that's, I think we ought to consider that going forward. Is there any comment or discussion from the board? Okay, do I have a motion on item 6?
I move to adopt the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of George Siliotis.
I'll second that.
Great. Counsel, will you please call the roll?
Motion on the table is approval of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 case of George Siliotis. Member Becton.
Yes, aye.
Member Silva.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, counsel.
Is there any, I'm so sorry.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry. There should have been time for public comment. I'm terribly sorry. I called.
No, no problem. Is there any public comment for this item? Looks like we have no public comment.
Thank you. The board will now convene into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126 sub C3 to discuss numbers 1 through 86 of the Victim Compensation Program. And board members, would you please remember to turn off your cameras and audio inputs before calling into the closed session line. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. The board is now reconvening into open session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126 sub 3. Do I have a motion for numbers 1 through 86 of the Victim Compensation Program?
I move approval of numbers 1 through 86 of the Victim Compensation Program.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Council, will you please call the roll?
Member Becton,
Aye.
Member Silva,
Aye.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you, Council. Is there any other business that needs to come before the board today? Seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move the meeting be adjourned.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Council. Will you please call the roll?
Member Becton,
Aye.
Member Silva,
Aye.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
motion passes.
The next meeting is scheduled to occur on November 18th, 2021.
Thanks so much,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Aye.